The banging on my front door was so loud it felt like the whole house shook, and I nearly spilled my coffee all over the floor. It wasn't even 9 a.m. yet, and the last thing I wanted was drama, but I should have known better. Living next to Karen meant drama was always right around the corner. I set my mug down and peeked through the blinds, already guessing who it was, and sure enough, there she stood, Karen, the self-appointed sheriff of the HOA. Clipboard in one hand, phone in the other, sunglasses on even though the sky was nothing but gray. She had that stance like she owned the place, like she was on some kind of mission. Only problem was, my property wasn't even under her precious HOA. I bought the house exactly because it sat right outside their jurisdiction line. That meant no dues, no rules, no nonsense. But try telling that to Karen. She lived and breathed HOA power like it was her lifeline, and the fact that I was immune to it burned her more than anything else. She started pounding again, her shrill voice cutting through the quiet morning. "Open up. This is HOA business," she yelled like she was the FBI serving a warrant. I just stood there watching her, part of me amused, part of me annoyed. I finally opened the door, not all the way, just enough to block the frame with my body. I wasn't about to invite her circus inside. "What do you want now, Karen?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. She lifted her chin, glaring at me like I was some kind of criminal. "Don't act like you don't know. We've been patient long enough. The HOA requires an inspection of your home, and you've ignored our notices. You can't keep dodging this forever." I almost laughed in her face. "Inspection? Karen, I've told you 100 times. This house isn't under the HOA. I don't pay dues. Your board has no authority over me. End of story." Her jaw clenched, and I could see that vein on her forehead start to pulse. "That's not true. All homes in this area must comply with HOA regulations. I don't care what you think your deed says. If you're living here, you play by our rules." She tried to push forward, but I leaned casually against the doorframe. "Not happening. You're not coming into my house. End of discussion." Her eyes narrowed into slits. "You're making a big mistake," she hissed, her tone sharp enough to cut glass. Then, in the most dramatic move I've ever seen, she held her phone up like it was a weapon. "If you don't let me in, I'll have no choice but to call 911. Let's see how the police feel about your attitude." For a second, I thought she was bluffing. I mean, who in their right mind calls emergency services because they can't force their way into a neighbor's house? But Karen wasn't bluffing. She hit the numbers with the speed of someone who'd been waiting her whole life for this moment. As she put the phone to her ear, I just stood there dumbfounded, part of me angry, part of me entertained. She really thought the police were going to come drag me out of my own house for not letting her barge in. "Hello, yes, this is an emergency," she said in that over-the-top panic tone, pacing on my porch. She was performing now, loud enough that I could hear every word. "I'm with the HOA, and this man is refusing to comply with regulations. He's being aggressive and hostile, and he won't let me enter the property." Aggressive? I was literally standing there in sweatpants with a coffee mug in hand, looking more like a tired dad than a threat. But she just kept piling it on. "Yes, I feel unsafe. He's glaring at me and refusing to follow the rules." Inside, I shook my head in disbelief. This was pure Karen theater. The neighborhood already knew she was intense, but this was a new level even for her. I could picture her in her HOA meetings, bragging about how she took care of the non-compliant neighbor. Except now she had no idea who she was really messing with. Because here's the thing, my wife, Emily, works as a dispatcher at the county's 911 center. She wasn't on shift that morning, but her best friend Lisa was. And when Karen made that call, it was Lisa who picked up. That meant every exaggerated word Karen spoke was being recorded, analyzed, and quietly passed along to Emily in real time. Standing in the doorway, I heard Lisa's calm dispatcher voice come through on speaker. "Ma'am, can you confirm, are you saying someone is physically threatening you?" Karen froze for a second. Well, no, but he won't let me in. That's against the HOA rules." Lisa's voice didn't even flinch. "Ma'am, refusing to allow you entry into their private home is not a police emergency. Do you feel unsafe?" Karen puffed up, realizing she was losing control. Yes. Yes, I feel unsafe. He's intimidating me." She shot me a glance, expecting me to play the part of the villain. I just sipped my coffee, deadpan. Emily's phone buzzed inside the living room. She glanced down, read the message, and then burst into laughter. She held it up for me to see. It was from Lisa. "Your crazy HOA lady just called 911 on your husband. Don't worry, I'm handling it." I couldn't help but smirk. Karen had no clue she'd just dialed into the one system where my wife basically ran the show. The irony was too good. Karen kept pacing, clutching her clipboard like it gave her authority. She kept repeating the same nonsense about regulations and non-compliance, but Lisa wasn't buying a word of it. "Ma'am, unless there is a real emergency, someone hurt, in danger, or committing a crime, you cannot use 911 this way. This is not a criminal matter." Karen's face turned red, and she shouted into the phone, "It is a crime. He's breaking HOA laws." At that point, I nearly choked trying not to laugh. HOA laws? She really believed her bylaws carried the weight of state law. She thought she could actually weaponize the police against me for saying no. I leaned against the doorframe, watching her unravel, and I realized something. She was so blinded by her power trip that she didn't even notice the trap she'd walked herself into. Because once the police got involved, this whole scene wasn't going to end the way she imagined. And with Emily quietly pulling strings from the dispatcher's desk, Karen was about to face the biggest humiliation of her HOA career. And me? I just sipped my coffee, calm as ever, waiting for the show to really begin. Karen was pacing back and forth on my porch, her phone still pressed to her ear, her voice climbing higher with every sentence she spit out. The thing about Karen is that she always acted like the HOA gave her police powers. She thought bylaws were the same thing as state laws, and she believed she could force anyone to bend if she just shouted loud enough. But this morning was different. This morning she had just called 911 and set herself up for the biggest embarrassment of her life. I didn't even have to say much, I just stood there in my doorway, arms crossed, coffee mug in hand, watching her unravel. She was convinced she had me cornered, but she had no idea my wife Emily's best friend Lisa was the one on the other end of that line, listening to every exaggerated word come out of Karen's mouth. From inside the house, I could hear Lisa's dispatcher voice, calm and precise. "Ma'am, just to clarify, you are not in physical danger right now?" she asked. Karen fumbled, stammering a little because the truth was she wasn't in danger at all. "Well, I mean, not exactly. But he's intimidating me by blocking my way. He won't let me enter." Lisa replied instantly, her tone steady like stone. "Ma'am, a homeowner refusing to let you enter their residence is not a police matter. Do you have any evidence of a crime being committed?" Karen's eyes darted to me, and she actually pointed her finger at my chest like she had something. "Yes. He's breaking the rules. He's supposed to comply with HOA inspections, and he refuses. That's obstruction." I nearly laughed out loud. "Obstruction of what, Karen? Your clipboard?" I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. But she ignored me, focusing on her little performance for Lisa. Lisa didn't miss a beat. "Ma'am, HOA bylaws are not criminal law. This does not fall under 911 jurisdiction. If you feel it's a civil matter, you need to handle it with your HOA board or through small claims court." That was the nail in the coffin, but Karen wasn't ready to give up. She turned toward the street, her free hand gesturing wildly as if she were addressing a crowd. No, no, you don't understand. This man is a danger to the neighborhood. If he's allowed to ignore the rules, everyone else will think they can too. I'm telling you, this is a community safety issue. Inside, Emily was reading the texts Lisa was sending her in real time. She's losing it. Trying to make HOA rules sound like national security. Emily showed me the phone, and I shook my head, grinning. This was better than TV. The funniest part was that Karen didn't realize Lisa knew me and Emily personally. She didn't realize the dispatcher was laughing behind her headset while logging her nonsense. To Karen, this was her big victory lap. She really thought she was building her case against me. Ma'am, Lisa said firmly, cutting through Karen's rambling, I need you to answer clearly. Has this man physically threatened you or harmed you in any way? Karen hesitated, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. I could see the calculation running in her head. If she said yes, she'd be lying on a recorded line. If she said no, she'd lose all credibility. Finally, she blurted out, he's glaring at me. He's using intimidation tactics. At that, I couldn't help it. I laughed. I laughed so hard I almost dropped my mug. Karen, I'm standing here in pajama pants. The scariest thing I've done this morning is make coffee too strong. Her face went red. See? You hear him? Aggressive and mocking. This is harassment. Lisa's sigh was audible even over the phone. Ma'am, you called 911 to report that your neighbor is glaring at you? Karen straightened up, trying to regain her authority. Yes. Exactly. And refusing to obey HOA bylaws. That's what I'm reporting. Inside my house, Emily leaned against the wall, giggling uncontrollably. She whispered, Lisa is never gonna let her live this down. I could already imagine Lisa's notes on the report. Caller states subject is glaring. No crime committed. Karen stomped her foot like a child. You people don't understand. If he doesn't let me in, he could be hiding violations, illegal paint colors, unapproved modifications, who knows what else. He could have chickens in there for all I know. Chickens? I raised an eyebrow. Karen, you want to come in and check if I've got chickens in my living room? That set her off even more. She pointed at me again. Mockery. You see? He's mocking me in front of law enforcement. This is exactly the kind of behavior I've been warning the HOA about. Lisa's voice came back, firmer now. Ma'am, I'm dispatching a unit to your location to confirm. But I need you to understand, this is not a criminal matter. If the responding deputy determines this is a misuse of 911 services, there may be consequences. The second Karen heard dispatching a unit, her entire demeanor changed. She puffed her chest out like she had just won the lottery. Good. Good. Send them. Finally, someone will see what I've been dealing with. She glared at me triumphantly. You're finished. Once the police show up, you'll regret ever defying me. I leaned against the doorframe, sipping my coffee slowly, enjoying every second. Karen, I can't wait for them to get here, I said with a smirk. Really? This is going to be fun. She mistook my calm for fear and kept ranting. You'll see. They'll write you up, they'll fine you, maybe even arrest you for obstruction. I'll make sure the HOA board knows exactly how uncooperative you are. Little did she know, the board was already tired of her antics. I'd had quiet conversations with other neighbors who were fed up with her power trips. If anything, her calling 911 over something this ridiculous was only going to blow back on her harder than she realized. Emily came over and whispered in my ear, Lisa says the deputy assigned is Officer Daniels. You know, the one who can't stand Karen. Oh, this is gonna be good. That made me chuckle. Officer Daniels had dealt with Karen before. She once tried to ticket her own neighbor for having too many cars in the driveway, and actually called the cops on it. Daniels had been the one to explain that 3 cars in a driveway wasn't a crime. From what I heard, he wasn't exactly fond of her follow-up complaint letters either. So there we were, Karen pacing on my porch, clutching her clipboard like it was a holy text, convinced the cavalry was coming to back her up, while Emily and I just exchanged amused glances, knowing the exact opposite was about to happen. The best part? Karen still hadn't put 2 and 2 together. She didn't realize that Emily, standing 5 feet away from me, was not only a dispatcher but the wife of the man she was accusing. And she didn't realize her 911 call was already a joke at the dispatch center. All I had to do was wait. The deputy was on his way, Karen was digging her own hole deeper with every word, and I was about to witness one of the sweetest moments of neighborhood justice I could have ever asked for. So I leaned back against the doorframe, raised my coffee in a little mock toast to Karen, and thought to myself, sometimes you don't have to fight your battles. Sometimes, the universe just lines everything up perfectly and lets people bury themselves. And Karen? She was already waist deep, still shoveling. The sound of tires crunching on the gravel snapped Karen out of her pacing routine. She immediately straightened her back, brushed imaginary dust off her blazer, and plastered the most self-righteous smirk on her face. The sheriff's cruiser pulled up right in front of my driveway, and out stepped none other than Deputy Daniels. Just as Emily had said, fate had sent the one man in the department who knew Karen's antics better than anyone. He adjusted his hat, looked at me, then at Karen, then back at me again, and the corner of his mouth twitched like he already knew exactly what kind of nonsense he was walking into. "There he is, officer," Karen screeched, pointing at me like I was a fugitive on the run. "That's the man I was telling you about. He's hostile, uncooperative, and he's refusing to let me inspect his house under HOA rules." She shook her clipboard for dramatic effect, as though the papers inside were evidence of some massive crime. Daniels didn't even flinch. He walked up the steps calmly, tipped his hat slightly, and said, "Morning, sir. Care to tell me what's going on here?" I shrugged, sipping my coffee casually. "Deputy, there's really not much to tell. I was having a quiet morning at home when Karen here started banging on my door, demanding to come inside for some kind of HOA inspection. I told her no. She threatened to call 911, and, well, here we are." Karen quickly interrupted, her voice shrill. "Don't listen to him, officer. He's lying. He's dangerous. He's violating the bylaws, and it's my duty to enforce them. If we let people like him get away with this, the whole neighborhood will collapse into chaos." Chaos. Daniels raised an eyebrow, his expression somewhere between disbelief and exhaustion. "Ma'am, let me get this straight, you called 911 because your neighbor wouldn't let you into his house?" Karen puffed up her chest like a proud peacock. "Exactly. That's right. He's obstructing HOA business. You need to do something about it immediately." Daniel sighed deeply, pulled out his little notepad, and scribbled something down. "Ma'am, refusing entry to an HOA representative is not a criminal matter. That's civil. The police don't get involved in HOA disputes." Karen blinked at him, her mouth opening and closing like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. "What? No, you don't understand. He's breaking the rules. He's not paying dues, he's not submitting paperwork for modifications, and I've seen suspicious activity on this property." Suspicious activity? That was news to me. Suspicious activity? I asked, arching an eyebrow. "Karen, are you talking about the time I watered my lawn at night? Because that's called being considerate during a drought, not criminal behavior." She whirled on me, her face red. "Don't you mock me. You think you're above the rules, but you're not. Everyone has to answer to the HOA." Daniels turned to her, his voice now firmer. Ma'am, I'll say this as clearly as possible, HOA bylaws are not state law. You cannot enter this man's home without his permission. And you absolutely cannot use 911 to enforce neighborhood rules. That's not what emergency services are for. Karen's face twisted in horror, and she gestured wildly at me like Daniels had missed something obvious. But, he's glaring at me. He's mocking me. He's hostile. Daniels gave me a long look, taking in my relaxed stance, the steaming coffee mug, the pajama pants. Then he looked back at Karen. Hostile? He looks like he just rolled out of bed. The only thing he's threatening is that cup of coffee. I chuckled, which only made Karen stomp her foot like an angry child. This isn't a joke, she shrieked. You're supposed to be on my side. You're supposed to protect the community. Just then, his radio crackled. And over it came Emily's voice, clear, professional, but with that subtle edge of satisfaction only I could recognize. Unit 12, just a reminder, we've had multiple prior complaints logged from that caller, Karen Miller, regarding non-emergencies. Advise her that continued misuse of 911 could result in fines or further consequences. Karen froze like someone had just poured ice water down her back. She knew that voice. She'd heard Emily shut her down at community meetings before. Now she was realizing that the dispatcher monitoring this entire situation was none other than my wife. Her head whipped toward me, eyes wide. She's your wife? I raised my mug in a little salute. Yep. And apparently, she's the one listening to your complaints every time you call the county about lawn gnomes and driveway lengths. Daniels bit back a smile, clearly enjoying the show. Ma'am, dispatch is confirming what I already suspected. This call was a misuse of emergency services. Do you realize 911 is for life-threatening emergencies? While I was driving here, I could have been responding to a real call. Someone in an accident, someone having a medical emergency. Instead, I'm here because you don't like that your neighbor won't let you in his house. Karen stammered, her voice shrill and shaky. But I thought. Daniels cut her off. No buts. You can't do this again. This is a warning. Next time, there could be fines, or worse. He pulled out a small slip and began writing her up formally. Her smugness drained away completely, replaced with a pale, almost trembling look. She clutched her clipboard like it was a life raft. This isn't fair. I was only doing my job. Daniels handed her the slip. Your job is not law enforcement, ma'am. The HOA doesn't trump state law. You don't call 911 unless someone's life is in danger, understood? Karen stared at the paper in her hand, her lip trembling with rage. She looked like she wanted to argue, but the deputy's glare shut her up quick. For once, the words died in her throat. I leaned against the doorframe, enjoying the sight. Karen, looks like your little power trip just got derailed, I said smoothly. Her eyes burned holes through me, but she didn't dare respond. Daniels crossed his arms. One more thing, ma'am. If I hear you've been harassing this homeowner again, I'll be back, and not with a warning. Karen spun around in a huff, muttering under her breath as she stormed off my porch. I watched her stomp down the street, clipboard bouncing against her side like it had betrayed her. Daniels turned to me, smirking now that she was out of earshot. She's something else, huh? I chuckled. You have no idea. Thanks for dealing with that circus. He tipped his hat. Just doing my job. But I'll be honest, I wish people would stop thinking HOA rules are the same as the law. She's lucky this was just a warning. As his cruiser pulled away, I stood there in the doorway, sipping the last of my coffee. Karen had called the cops on me thinking she'd finally put me in my place. Instead, she'd been humiliated in front of the entire county dispatch system and given a written warning for wasting resources. And the best part? She didn't even realize yet how fast word of this was going to spread. The quiet that settled over my porch after Deputy Daniels drove away felt sweeter than any morning coffee could ever taste. For the first time all day, there wasn't Karen's shrill voice bouncing off the walls of my house, no pounding on my door, no ridiculous clipboard waving in my face. Just silence. I leaned against the railing, sipping the last of my coffee, and let out a deep breath. Emily came out, phone in hand, still chuckling. "Lisa's blowing up my texts," she said, holding the screen toward me. Sure enough, there were line after line of laughing emojis and commentary. "She actually said you were glaring at her," followed by, "Daniels almost lost it when she claimed HOA rules were law." Emily's grin was contagious, and I couldn't help but laugh along with her. The show might have been over at my house, but for Karen, the story was just beginning. The HOA queen had finally been knocked off her throne, and the cracks in her armor were already starting to spread through the neighborhood grapevine faster than wildfire. In communities like ours, gossip traveled at the speed of light, and Karen's humiliation was the juiciest story people had gotten in months. By the afternoon, I stepped outside to grab the mail and noticed my neighbor, Jeff, standing by his truck with a grin on his face. "Heard you had quite the morning," he called out. "Karen really went and called 911 on you?" I shook my head, chuckling. "Yep. Claimed I was hostile because I wouldn't let her do an HOA inspection. Daniels shut her down real quick." Jeff whistled low, shaking his head. "Man, I wish I'd seen her face when that backfired. She's been bugging me for weeks about repainting my garage door because she says the color isn't on her approved palette. I was just waiting for her to cross a line." Another neighbor, Mrs. Green, shuffled over from her garden, clearly having overheard. She wiped dirt from her gloves and said with a smirk, "Word is, the dispatcher she called was your wife. That true?" I grinned. "It is." She didn't know who she was dealing with. Mrs. Green laughed so hard she had to steady herself on the fence. "Oh, that's rich. Karen must be absolutely mortified." And she was. The next day, when I took out the trash, I spotted her walking her little yappy dog down the street. Normally she'd strut around like she owned every inch of pavement, but this time her shoulders were hunched, her sunglasses oversized, and she avoided eye contact with everyone. For the first time since I'd moved into the neighborhood, Karen wasn't on patrol, wasn't lecturing anyone, wasn't bossing people around. She was quiet. But the neighborhood wasn't. People started whispering. "Did you hear what she did? Can you believe she called 911 over an HOA issue? They gave her a warning. Next time she could get fined." It didn't take long before the whole street was buzzing with the story, and each retelling made Karen look more and more ridiculous. At the next HOA meeting, which I didn't bother to attend, several neighbors told me it was chaos. Karen tried to resume her usual power stance, barking at people about lawn heights and mailbox colors, but half the room was snickering. One brave resident even raised their hand and asked, "Karen, are you going to call 911 if my grass gets too long?" The entire room burst into laughter, and Karen turned bright red, stammering about community standards. The HOA board itself, tired of dealing with the fallout, finally stepped in. They couldn't ignore that one of their most vocal enforcers had embarrassed the entire association by wasting police resources. Daniels had submitted a report, and Emily had ensured the misuse was officially logged. The board suggested that Karen take a break from her volunteer enforcement role, which was their polite way of saying she needed to back off. She didn't take it well. For the next week, I'd catch glimpses of her pacing her front yard, waving her arms as she ranted on the phone to someone, probably another board member, maybe even her husband, though he was rarely seen. But no matter how much she raged, she couldn't undo what had happened. Her reputation was shot. One evening, Jeff knocked on my door holding a couple of beers. "Figured we ought to celebrate," he said. "Neighborhood's been waiting for someone to finally stand up to Karen, and you did it without even lifting a finger. Just had to let her implode on herself. We sat on my porch, clinking bottles, and laughed as more neighbors drifted over. People shared their Karen horror stories. How she'd once demanded a family take down Christmas lights before New Year's Day, how she'd left nasty notes on cars parked too close to the curb, how she measured a neighbor's grass with a ruler. But the highlight, the story everyone kept circling back to, was her infamous 911 call. She said he was glaring at her. Mrs. Green cackled, nearly spilling her lemonade. Since when is glaring illegal? The laughter was non-stop, and the more people joked, the smaller Karen's power seemed. Her reign of terror, built on intimidation and bullying, was crumbling piece by piece. Emily came out and joined us, grinning ear to ear. Lisa said people at the dispatch center are still laughing about it. They've started calling it the Karen Glare case. It's practically folklore now. The nickname spread like wildfire. Soon enough, neighbors were joking that they had to be careful not to glare too hard at Karen, or she might call 911 again. Every time someone said it, the group roared with laughter, and though Karen tried to avoid us, there was no escaping the reality. She had become the neighborhood punchline. Weeks went by, and Karen's presence dwindled. She stopped making her rounds, stopped banging on doors, stopped handing out violation slips. It was as if she'd retreated into her house, licking her wounds. The neighborhood grew quieter, friendlier, lighter. Without her constant interference, people finally relaxed. Barbecues popped up again. Kids played in the street without her screeching about noise levels. Even the lawns looked a little more free, with folks less worried about her showing up with her ruler. And me? I enjoyed every moment of the peace. My mornings went back to normal, quiet coffee on the porch, no pounding on the door, no screaming about bylaws. Every time I saw Emily, I'd tease her. Best dispatcher ever. You didn't just save the day, you saved the whole neighborhood. She'd laugh and nudge me. All I did was my job. Karen did the rest herself. But we both knew the truth. Karen's downfall was poetic justice. She had built her life around rules and control, but the moment she tried to weaponize that against the wrong person, it all came crashing down. She thought the law was on her side, but when the real law showed up, it exposed her for what she was, a bully with a clipboard and an overinflated ego. And as much as Karen hated me, I didn't have to lift a finger to win. All I had to do was say no. She did the rest. The irony never stopped being sweet. Every time I heard neighbors chuckling about the glare crime or spotted Karen shuffling past with her head down, I remembered that morning, the pounding on my door, the coffee in my hand, the disbelief as she actually called 911. I remembered Emily's grin when Lisa texted, and Daniel's smirk when he told her she was wasting resources. That's when I realized something important. Sometimes the best revenge is simply standing your ground and letting the other person reveal themselves for who they really are. Karen had always acted like she was untouchable, but in the end, she exposed herself. And once she did, the entire neighborhood saw the truth. So I sat back, porch light glowing, bottle in hand, and smiled. Karen had tried to make me the villain of her story. But instead, she became the joke of mine.